Where's everyone going? Bingo?
With the upcoming release of the Resident Evil 4 remake, I figured it'd be wise to re-upload my original review with a few of its bells and whistles tweaked. I'll also include a short review of the RE4 VR version at the end. Without further ado, enjoy the review! I think people underestimate how influential the original Resident Evil was back when it came out. Sure, Alone in the Dark and Clock Tower predated Resident Evil and did a lot of what made it so good, but Resident Evil brought all of what made those two games so great together and created a new standard for what survival horror games should be. Every survival horror game wanted to be like Resident Evil, and while most of them were, well, bad, some arguably did survival horror better than Resident Evil, or, well, at least Silent Hill did. So with a solid trilogy on the PS1 and a bunch of spin-offs that were the series was still going strong by the time of Resident Evil 1 Remake and Zero coming out in 2002. Resident Evil 4, however, had been in development since 1999 when Resident Evil 3 was released. Series creator Shinji Mikami and the rest of the dev team wanted to switch things up for not only the next numbered sequel in the RE series, but the next generation of survival horror. The team decided to go with a more action route with the newest Resident Evil game, utilizing the new generation's hardware to its fullest. That's how we got one of the greatest games of all time, Devil May Cry. Yeah, Devil May Cry started out as Resident Evil 4. The director of Devil May Cry, Hideki Kamiya, had previously worked on the Resident Evil series as a planner for the original game and the director for its sequel. Everyone really liked Kamiya's Resident Evil 4, but agreed it deviated a little too much from the original series style, so that's why Kamiya's RE4 became a new series, Devil May Cry. There were a few more prototypes for RE4 before the final release. The FOG version of Resident Evil 4 would feature the protagonist from Resident Evil 2, Leon, exploring an old castle owned by the evil corporation Umbrella. It would feature the series staple zombies, as well as Leon getting infected by a progenitor virus that would give him some sort of hidden power in his left hand. The gameplay of the FOG version isn't specified, but it would apparently feature first-person elements. But this version was scrapped. A lot of its elements would be used in the final RE4, like the old castle and Leon getting infected, and a progenitor virus plus old ties to Umbrella would be featured in RE5. The third version of RE4, the Hookman version, was shown off a bit and had similar story beats to the FOG version. The virus Leon gets infected with makes him experience paranormal entities, most notable being a ghost with a large hook, hence the name Hookman. The gameplay style looked to be classic Resident Evil movement with fixed camera angles, until you aim your gun. Then the camera goes to the Resident Evil 4 aiming system we are familiar with. There was one more prototype of RE4, the Hallucination version. This one had concepts from both the FOG and Hookman versions like the castle, zombies, and being stalked by someone.
Resident Evil 4 will be scary. Don't pee your pants.
This version was scrapped and we finally got the Resident Evil 4 we know today, exclusively to GameCube. Yeah. It's been a little over 15 years since RE4 first came out, and it still feels incredibly solid even today. So much so that the only real falter of this survival horror game is the fact that it isn't really that scary. But I mean, hey, I'm a huge wimp, so that works for me. Even if it's not all that scary, RE4 re-revolutionized the survival horror genre. And even to this day, horror games are still using gameplay elements that started in RE4. Even modern Resident Evil games use RE4's design decisions and elements. And while I might like the atmosphere of the RE2 remake compared to RE4's, there's no denying that Resident Evil 4 is probably one of the most solid gaming experiences one can have. In Resident Evil 4, you play as Leon Scott Kennedy, who, as I said before, was one of the two protagonists from Resident Evil 2. In that game, Leon was a rookie cop going through the first day on the job from hell, where in RE4, he's working for the government and is tasked with rescuing the President of the United States' daughter, Ashley Graham. Somebody climbed the corporate ladder, Jesus. Once Leon arrives at the rural town Ashley is apparently at, it is discovered that the townsfolk aren't necessarily the friendliest because they all will instantly become hostile the second they see Leon. Common misconception is that every Resident Evil game is only about zombies. For the first 3 games, this may have been the case, but even with those games, the zombies are more like Goombas compared to all the other wacky creatures you encounter. Resident Evil 4 completely does away with zombies in favor of these possessed villagers called the Ganados. So yeah, that scene in Breaking Bad is lies!
No, man. Resident Evil 4 takes it by a long shot. That chick, the one you gotta rescue, she's smoking, bro. Talk about inspiring a brother to kick some zombie ass!
They aren't zombies, you fuck! These villagers are infected with a parasite called Las Plagas, which makes its way into Leon very early on in the plot. So the rest of the game is Leon, 1, trying to find and protect Ashley, 2, searching for a cure for Las Plagas as Ashley is also infected with it, and 3, taking out the colorful cast of villains that are in control of Las Plagas. I'm not saying this just because the main villain of the game, Osmond Sadler, consistently makes reference to this. But this game's plot feels a lot like a Hollywood action movie in the perfect kind of way. Where the previous games felt like horror films that become action films by the end, RE4 starts as an action film and stays that way, one-liners and all.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Yeah, good one, Leon. All of these characters are just fun to listen to and watch. No longer is Leon all, "Why doesn't anyone listen to me?"
Man, why doesn't anyone ever listen to me?
Instead, he's all, "Your right hand comes off."
Your right hand comes off?
He's the stereotypical all-American hero. One-liners, professional demeanor, and badass action scenes. Of course, Leon isn't the only character of note. The supporting cast is also very fun. Luis Serra, a local Leon runs into, stands out to me as he's the closest thing Leon gets to a sidekick. But Luis almost seems like he's doing his own Resident Evil game. His cocky personality jives really well with his want to help Leon, and honestly, I love any character voiced by Reno Romero. He has such a good voice.
Americano, see? Now what brings a bloke like you to this part of the world? Oh, hey, I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics, too.
Ashley is a character nobody can seem to agree on. Either you love her or despise her. I can understand having such strong opinions on her since she's with you for, well, like half the game. I think people are too harsh on her, though. She definitely fits the innocent damsel in distress role, but she isn't completely helpless when the plot allows for it. When she is with Leon, she remains purely as the VIP to protect, but she can help with a few puzzles that require two people. I also get a kick out of her getting pumped up when Leon shoots a guy. But the complaint that people have with her is that she's annoying because she screams for help when being attacked or kidnapped. Yeah? Bro, she's fucking scared. What do you expect? God forbid somebody fears for their life. This isn't like Baby Mario from Yoshi's Island. Now that's annoying. Ashley crying for help when she needs it fits the situation at hand. Hell, she doesn't even yell that much, so like, what is everyone complaining about? I barely had her in danger throughout my playthrough anyways, so really people who think Ashley is annoying probably just suck at the game. Anyways, most of these characters fit action movie tropes, but they're also fun about it, especially the villains. Each one gets their boss fight time to shine, and honestly, I'm surprised of how much I like the main villain, Osmond Sadler. You'd think he'd just be a standard cult leader, but he's actually very open about his true intentions with Las Plagas and seems to be having fun with how much of a tropey action hero Leon is.
It should keep you busy.
Can't remember the name, huh? A senior moment, perhaps.
Oh, enjoy the fun.
He's an oddly human villain for a Resident Evil game. But let's not forget about the most iconic character from Resident Evil 4, the dog.
Hey, it's that dog.
No, of course I'm talking about the merchant.
Welcome.
For a character with less than 20 voiced lines in the game and who's mostly represented through text when you interact with him, even your uncle that played the game once back when it came out remembers the merchant. He's got an easy to recognize design and provides one of the most important services in the game, not to mention that voice. It must be some kind of Australian accent, but man if it isn't pleasant to hear.
I see you have an eye for things. Gun's not just about shooting. It's about reloading. You'll know what I'm talking about.
The merchant has almost become more iconic than Resident Evil 4 itself, getting plenty of references in other games and media, even shoehorned in references in Resident Evil 8.
What are you buying? Just something an old friend of mine used to say.
Resident Evil 4 having such a fun cast of characters is accompanied by a really fun gameplay style. All that really changed from the previous Resident Evil games is that they stuck the camera from fixed positions to right over your character's shoulder. So controls where forward is always forward and back is always back and left and right turn you in said directions makes more sense for newer players and makes for quicker movement. Readying the weapon now gives an aiming system opposed to the previous game's light auto aim. Now you gotta be conscious as to where on the enemy you're shooting since different areas of the enemy can yield different results. So much so that you'd almost swear previous games' enemies were designed with this concept in mind. Enemies and bosses now have this design philosophy even more so than before, and it really does make the combat that much more fun as a result. More intense too, really. All of the skills come from how quick you can draw and how accurately you can aim. There's a wide variety of weapons to work with here too, from series mainstays to newer concepts that fit really well with the new gameplay style. All of the weapons are user-friendly and can be utilized for unique gameplay styles, except the mine thrower, fuck that. Each weapon can be upgraded to be better, but there are also weapons that can be considered direct upgrades to each other in my opinion. Like, why upgrade the base pistol when the Red 9 is overpowered when fully upgraded? What really makes the combat fun for me is the context-sensitive prompts that can be used against the generic Ganado enemies. If you can get an enemy to do a specific animation after a specific shot, you can attack it in such a way that it can hit other enemies around them, allowing for easy crowd control. It's also helpful that the knife isn't a useless item that wastes inventory space here. It's permanently equipped and can be used by readying it with its own button. This makes it so much more useful than any other knife in the series. All it really needed was its own dedicated button. That and not to be a waste of space.
Speaking of that, probably my personal favorite feature in the game is the new inventory management system via the attaché case. Survival horror games are all about resource management, mainly because the original Resident Evil game gave you limited inventory space, so you would have to make choices between health items and weapons. Resident Evil 2 brought in the idea of some items taking up more than one space, which I think led to how the attaché case in Resident Evil 4 works. You get a grid-based system with this, and every item takes up a certain amount of that grid space. You have the ability to rotate and place these items wherever you want, so you can utilize and sort out the space however efficiently you see fit. Adding the element of inventory management makes the resource management part of the game actually fun when it was a part of the game before. Of course, key items are separate. There's actually a fun collecting aspect to key items since some items can be combined to create more valuable items to sell to the merchant.
I'll buy it.
Really, this game is a tight experience through and through. So much so that most people forget that a good portion of the game is, well, forgettable. Like, the intro mission is the best in the whole game, and there's the castle part that kinda goes on a little bit too long, and then the ending labs and construction site. Most parts in between aren't very notable. I remember the lake and the church, and of course the gray cabin sequence.
Adios, Leon.
Other than that, there isn't a whole lot of memorable moments between cutscenes and major area changes. That's not really a big deal since there's still a lot of memorable moments in the game. The only quote-unquote bad part of this survival horror game is that it's really not all that scary. Conceptually, having entire villages coming after you is scary, especially with that really intense track that plays when enemies are nearby. Pretty effective when you first play it, but the thing that makes it not so scary is the fact that the controls are too good. I never felt helpless while being surrounded by enemies. Just get in one good roundhouse kick and you'll have an easy escape. That's not to say there aren't scary enemies in the game, but it's less, oh, I hate looking at it, and more, oh, they can kill me in one hit. If there was any enemy that does a good job of being scary, it's the regenerator enemy. Creepy setting, design, and concept since it'll grow back any body part you shoot off. Only after you get a thermal scope can you see the weak points you need to shoot off, making good use of the new aiming mechanic. Other than that, yeah, RE4 is not scary at all. That doesn't make this game any less fun. Though if there's one thing that many fans can't seem to agree on, it's the mid-cutscene QuickTime events. QuickTime events weren't so commonly used by this point, so at the time these would catch players off guard. And the fact that they lead to instant game overs makes it clear why many people weren't too big on these. Honestly, I don't really like or dislike them. They're just kind of there, which probably means they should have cut them given that they don't really add anything to the game as a whole. Things added into the game that do make the experience worthwhile are the extra game modes you obtain upon completing the game. There are 3 in total. Separate Ways is basically a short B campaign where you get to play as Ada Wong through 5 levels showing what she was doing during the game's story. Since this is considered extra content, they have not remastered the cutscenes like they did for the base game. So get ready for some 2005 480p pixels on your 4K TV, folks.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Yeah, good one, Leon. The second extra mode is Assignment Ada, a non-canon, difficult-as-hell speedrunning mode where you play as Ada in the final area of the game looking for 5 Plaga samples. And I'll be honest, I'm not good enough to beat it. I like it conceptually, though, as a little challenge mission, and the ending for it apparently alludes to Resident Evil 5, which is fun. The final extra mode is the fan favorite, and that's the Mercenaries mode. This technically originated in RE3, but that was more like the extra missions in RE2. RE4's Mercenaries mode is an arcade score-based mode with a variety of stages and characters to choose from. The goal is to score as many points as you can and survive until the time limit runs out. There are score multipliers and special enemies on each map, and every character has a different weapon loadout and abilities they can use. Honestly, this mode is a blast if you love the combat in this game as much as I do. Being able to play as Jack Krauser, a boss in RE4, Hunk, the 4th survivor from RE2, and series villain Albert Wesker is such a treat since they all play so different. The only part I absolutely hate about the Mercenaries is that Luis isn't a playable character.
Oh, shit!
What the hell, his model is right there and clearly the Red 9 would have been his thing, not to mention that he's just a great character that was criminally underutilized. Kinda like a lot of Resident Evil characters now that I think about it.
Little rough, don't you think?
Be that as it may, the Mercenaries mode is a perfect mode to cap off a game as great as Resident Evil 4. It's a testament to how fun this game is to play and how tight of an experience it is. It might not be perfect, but damn if it isn't one hell of a game. So I think we all know the joke that RE4 is like Skyrim in the sense that it's available on everything. And that's because it's true. Any console you have, 9 times out of 10, RE4 is on it. Hell, they even just made a VR version of it. As I make this video, it's exclusive to the Zuck headset, so like hell if I'm gonna sell my soul to that thing.
Seeing as I realize my soul isn't worth much anyways, I finally got my hands on an Oculus Quest 2, if nothing else but to just play Resident Evil 4 VR. And I gotta say guys, this game is worth the price of admission. It is really, really good. Please excuse my shaky hands, but I really feel like RE4 RE4 VR is worth getting a Quest 2 for. I've never been one for VR, it has some cool concepts, but it never really has been my thing. With the Quest 2 being completely cordless, however, that alone made me want to at least give it a try. Well, one Easter after uploading my original RE4 review, I received a Quest 2 as a gift. What did I do first? Purchase RE4 VR. I then had to factory reset my Quest 2 because the initial console setup fucked up somehow. Kind of unrelated, later down the line I actually had to use the console's warranty to get a new one because I left it charging overnight and that fucked the battery for some reason. Gotta love this thing. But anyways, RE4 VR. It's literally RE4 as you remember it to a T. No cut corners, at least none that I saw. The only difference is now you are Leon S. Kennedy. When it comes to the movement in the game, you have a few options. I opted to do standing with snapped camera rotation. The smooth camera rotation was too much for me. In case you're still getting used to VR or you get motion sick easily, you can do a sit-down version, but I personally think that ruins one of the cooler parts of RE4 VR. All your gear is on you at all times. Your handgun is on your right hip, your two-handed weapon is on your right shoulder, your ammo is on your left hip, your healing item is on your left shoulder, your grenades are on your right breast, and your knife is on your left breast. No more going back to menus to swap weapons or use items. All the action is happening in real time, and man, this feels like how RE4 was always meant to feel. The shooting itself is satisfying as hell too. You still have your red laser sight so you can aim properly, and the reloading. Oh, the reloading. Having to manually reload each gun makes me feel so cool during combat. Just pop that clip in and pull back the top and the immersion in this world here is so much fun. Each gun has unique reloading types too, so you do have to get used to the way each of the weapons reload so you don't fuck up mid-combat. All the same mechanics from the main game are here too. Shoot ganados in specific spots to get specific staggers that happen so you can do specific attacks to them, but to actually point the gun at them and pull the trigger is so fucking satisfying. Now, the fact that when you do an attack animation of these guys, it zooms out so you can see Leon do the attack does ruin the immersion a little bit, but then again, it makes sense. If I can't get used to smooth camera rotation, that probably means that constant suplexes and roundhouse kicks would probably make me vom. Speaking of, all the cutscenes are portrayed in this weird void theater sort of way. And I mean, I get it. I'm sure they weren't down to remake all of these cutscenes in first person. And I don't hate it either, but to be honest, I've played RE4 enough to know what happens, so I usually just skip them anyways. Oh, and the QuickTime events are usually relegated to moving the controllers rapidly or something within this void. Not much for immersion, but they weren't that immersive in the original game either. Another odd thing is they sort of excluded some of the profanity from the game. Well, not really profanity, but anything related to sexy stuff, I suppose.
Small world, eh?
Who are you?
Oh, excuse me, Your Highness.
Mainly just the ballistics line and Leon's hands disappear whenever they go near Ashley. I mean, I get it, but it's not like, oh wait, hang on. Okay, it's not like blowing dudes' heads off and knifing people to death is any worse than wanting to pat Ashley on the head. What did you think I wanted to do? It's not like this ruins the game, it's just more of an indicator of who was really in control of this release. Just, man, this gameplay is so fun. Before playing this, I had no idea how they could make VR games feel more like games and not just novelty toys. But this game proves that you can certainly make a game with skill involved within VR. Getting good enough to start doing wacky shit with the guns is my major goal, and I love pulling it off. I won't act like RE4 VR is the first really good VR FPS, but it's the first really good one I've played. And fortunately for me, when I got my second Quest 2, they literally had just added the Mercenaries mode to the game as a free update. They could have just made the Mercenaries mode in VR and I would have bought a Quest 2 for it. This is, in my opinion, the best VR experience right here. A fast-paced arcade shooter where your combat actually feels satisfying is probably some of the most fun I've had playing video games in a long time. And hell, they even made a whole unique weapon for Jack's character in the Mercenaries mode. Again, not leaving any of the content out. Now, I know that apparently Resident Evil Village's VR mode for the PlayStation VR 2 is just as immersive as RE4 VR's is. And while I'm not looking to get a PSVR 2 anytime soon, you can bet your ass that once I do, that's the first thing I'm playing. But Resident Evil 4 VR with the Mercenaries mode is literally the only VR game I plan on coming back to until my Quest 2 breaks again for no reason. Is it better than the original RE4? I wouldn't go that far. But much like how, say, the Wii version of RE4 is fun for people to play as a different version of RE4, the VR version is an amazing alternative version of RE4 that I think every fan of RE4 should play. Will RE4 Remake's VR mode be able to outclass the original one? Well, I sure hope so, since Facebook won't let RE4 VR out of the Quest 2's dirty clutches. If that ever does get re-released on another console, it should be an instant buy. But for now, RE4 VR on the Quest 2 is my favorite VR game, and yeah, mainly because of the Mercenaries mode. And with all that said, let's get back to the original RE4 review.
Plenty of survival horror games took notes from RE4 after its release. Even, well, Resident Evil did. 5, 6, and the Revelation duology play like 4 does, and the modern remakes of RE2 and 3 clearly use 4's design philosophy as a base. Resident Evil 4 really made a huge impact on the survival horror genre, and it's a fantastic game. So why is this not my favorite Resident Evil game? Well, really it just comes down to the simple fact that Resident Evil 4 is lacking in the one thing that the previous games did really well, and that's having a spooky atmosphere. The early RE games aren't scary, not by a long shot.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
But if you take away the wacky voice acting and just look at the gameplay segments, they have an atmosphere that feels foreboding and creepy, even in the first game. Four, in my opinion, never has that. Its atmosphere feels a lot more like Doom without the metal playing in the background. There aren't too many memorable tracks in 4 other than the chase music and the save room theme, then the rad Spanish music at the start. The other Resident Evil games have very memorable soundtracks that I still remember to this day, all of which work with that foreboding atmosphere. The other factor to this is that in Resident Evil 4, I just feel too much like a badass to feel any emotion other than, I'm gonna fuck some innocent brainwashed villagers up. In earlier Resident Evil games, I feel like anything but badass. In fact, I'd say I'd feel very vulnerable in those games. Once again, working with that foreboding atmosphere. I'm in no way saying that this makes RE4 bad, I can't sing this game's praise enough. All I'm saying is that I fell in love with the survival horror genre because of the way that those early Resident Evil games made me feel, and 4 just doesn't have that. To be honest, by a gameplay standpoint, no Resident Evil game holds a candle to 4. But does that make it the best Resident Evil game? In my opinion, no. It's of course an amazing game and one of the best ever made, but if I want to play a Resident Evil survival horror game, I'd rather play one that prioritizes the survival and horror part of the game. Resident Evil 4 is more of an action horror game, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with a sequel being something different than its predecessors. That's what makes a long-running series interesting. But we will all have our preferences as to what we like better, and for me, it's fixed camera angles and weird controls. With all of that said, Resident Evil 4 is one of the best action games ever made, and it's one of my favorites that I'll keep coming back to over and over again. And really with a series with such diverse entries as... Jackson, what do you want? I'm filming.
Open it! Stay up!
Jackson, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop! Let go of me! Let go! Jackson, what's your problem? Jackson?
Oh, no.